I just want to say a few words about the protests that are going on in France. Now, I have to be clear here. I have not followed the specific issues around the protest very closely. I understand it's to do with frustration around fuel hikes, and the protests have been dubbed yellow shirt protests or something like that. But I don't know all the details, so I don't want to talk so much about the contentions. And I don't think I really need to, because my views on the approach that the protesters are taking would be the same regardless of what the issue was. Um, this kind of protest seems to be a national sport in France. And I'm not saying that in a glib or mocking way. I think it's sad. France is a great country, but the tendency for its own citizens, I should say some of its own citizens, to want to destroy it so often is hard to fathom. Now, it's not that we're completely immune to this in the UK, of course not, but it does seem to be a particularly French style of protest. Um, and I think it is both the domain of the hard right and the far left, for different reasons. Um, but when people are vandalizing other people's property, when they're turning over cars, when they're smashing up coffee shops, when they're throwing Molotov cocktails at the police, what does that achieve? What does it achieve? Oh, I mean, destroying your own city. What the hell? It's like the England riots in 2011. That was People said it was to do with austerity. Well, I'm a staunch critic of the Conservative Party, and I was very angry with some of the policies that the Tories had back then, the targeting of disabled welfare recipients, for instance. But burning other people's property doesn't, give a bloody nose to a government. All it does is irritate and polarize your fellow citizens. And it's right and left. They have more in common than they think, the far right and the far left, because they both have this contempt for what they see as a neoliberal world order. Whatever you think of that, this sort of protest just doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't. Now, some will say, oh, but they've had enough and they're showing their frustration. Okay, show your frustration in another way. Shout, scream, but don't target other people's property. That doesn't, as an observer, I don't look at that and say, oh, well, they've been pushed to this. No, I say that's mindless vandalism. Be responsible for your own actions. You're not bloody children. Um, I mean, it makes me angry because, Paris is one of the world's great cultural cities, and to see it just people just showing this mindless vandalism, it makes no sense to me. I'm not saying the anger makes no sense. I'm saying this approach makes no sense. Apparently, President Macron had to leave the G20 in Buenos Aires early, and he's contemplating declaring a state of emergency. It seems every French president has to deal with this. I think there is something going right back to the French Revolution. There's an anarchistic nature in French culture, and to any French viewers, I hope that's not insulting. It's just something I've noticed that there seems to be this. There's always been an anti-establishment culture in France, regardless of who's in power, and it comes from the right and the left. And every country has its protests, but there's something about the nature of protests in France that is just almost like there is this acceptance of anarchy. And I'm not going to generalize. I'm sure there's many French citizens who don't like to see this any more than outsiders do. I'm sure there's French citizens who don't want to see their property destroyed or their cars overturned. So what are these people doing? Are they achieving their goals? They're bringing attention to the subject? Is that the idea? Because if it is, maybe we can say, okay, well, it's working. But put it this way, if I don't drive, but if I had a vehicle and protesters turned it over to be angry at the government, I'm not going to suddenly become sympathetic with them and oh, I see your point. You targeted my vehicle, therefore I agree with you. It's just madness. So I'd like to hear some French perspectives. I mean, what does this achieve? It makes no sense to me.